Okay. So welcome everyone to the Story of Plastic webinar. Before we begin, we would like to start this event by taking a moment of silence. There's a lot of pain right now in this country. There's a lot of loss from coronavirus. There's the hard and uncomfortable truth that Black men, Black women, and Black children fear for their lives when they're simply trying to enjoy the outdoors. So let's together take a moment of silence to honor and acknowledge the people we've lost and those who are struggling, and connect with that place of love and kindness that is in all of our hearts. All right, thank you everyone. I think we're ready now to start our event. I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Chrissy Adamos, and I am the Sustainable Maine Outreach Coordinator for the Natural Resources Council of Maine. NRCM is a nonprofit membership organization protecting, restoring, and conserving Maine's environment now and for future generations. For 60 years, the Natural Resources Council of Maine has been protecting the places that make Maine so special. NRCM harnesses the power of the law, science, and the voices of more than 25,000 supporters statewide and beyond. Anya.
Hi everyone, my name is Anya Fetcher. I'm the State Director for Environment Maine. So in case you aren't aware, Environment Maine is a nonprofit environmental advocacy organization working to protect Maine's environment, advocating for clean air, clean water, clean energy, wildlife and open spaces, and a livable climate. Using the power of grassroots support, we focus on timely, targeted action that wins tangible results for the quality of our environment and for our lives. So in a moment, first, again, welcome everyone. In a moment, we're gonna start with a quick slideshow just to sort of review some of the key takeaways from the documentary and refresh your memory in case maybe you watched it a couple nights ago. And then the way that the rest of the evening will go is we're gonna let our panelists, Nicole, Vanessa, and John introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about themselves and what they thought of the film. And then we do have some questions to get us going to ask the panelists. And we'll also open it up to audience for questions. So some of you may have already submitted questions through our post-film questionnaire, thank you. But we are also really encouraging you as people are talking, as we're discussing, to ask questions throughout using the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So you can feel free to submit those questions as they arise, and we'll do our best to get to as many as possible. If at any point during this event you have technical difficulties or questions about Zoom, you can use the chat box, which is also at the bottom of your screen, to ask our Zoom guru, Todd. You can ask him a question and he'll try to help you out. So after the bulk of the discussions and questions, we'll wrap that up, and we're gonna finish off with going over a few important ways that you can take action to combat plastic pollution. And then just a couple things to note. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on YouTube in the coming days. So keep an eye out and you can share it with others. Also, the technology that we have right now is great, of course, but it's not always perfect. So hopefully we won't encounter any technical difficulties, but if we do, please bear with us. We'll get things back running in no time. And then last, just so you're aware, attendees' video and audio is disabled for today's program. That's done on purpose so that we can focus on the panelists. So you will only be able to see and hear our presenters and then our slideshow as well. All right, Chrissy.
Okay. So we're going to do just a quick little movie review, mostly because we couldn't watch this film all together like we normally would. I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page and sort of highlight some of the big takeaways that a lot of us who do this work thought were really important. First and foremost, we want to make it clear that it is big oil and gas who are behind this plastic crisis. And I was so pleased that the movie really pointed this out very well. They're driving demand by putting everything in plastic and packaging everything in plastic and making everything out of plastic. The biggest sector, growing sector of this new market is product packaging. So that's something that we don't really often think about is product packaging, but it's actually a big sink hole for new plastic products. They're doing this to hedge their bets because they see that there's a big demand for clean energy and they're looking for new markets. So they want to make more plastic, and the result in this country is that they're polluting a lot of communities in the Gulf Coast and in the Upper Ohio River Valley. And they're trying to find more. They're expanding all over the country. They're also flooding other countries with plastic that never goes away. We saw how they're targeting poor countries with a single-use disposable sort of lifestyle and selling products in packets, small single-dose packets that can't be recycled, that are meant to be thrown away. Think of those sachets that were multi-layered. Meanwhile, wealthier countries had no real good place to sell their recyclables. And so a lot of that in a lot of communities, not all communities, was sent to these poorer countries where they had no infrastructure to handle all that waste. And the result is that people of color disproportionately bear that burden. And it's also washing into our oceans and into our environment. Here at home, taxpayers are stuck paying for a waste stream they didn't create. We are on the hook for a stream of cheap plastics. It's growing in complexity, and we have no help from the people who are making it. Wouldn't it be nice if we could incentivize the making of packaging that is truly recyclable? Right now, we just have to scramble and manage what's sent to us without any say. And the thing that gets me the most is that recycling starts at the design stage. And they know that, the plastic makers know that, and yet they refuse to help us by designing for people in mind, for taxpayers in mind, for the environment in mind. I'm sure you can find examples all over your house of products that look recyclable or say they're recyclable, but really aren't. They might have a small little chasing arrow symbol on it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's recyclable. And that all means that consumers and people on the ground are going to be confused, and that causes contamination, and it ends up costing us. So we need to make plastic makers take responsibility for this crisis. And there are a lot of policy solutions out there, and places all over the world are implementing those. We've seen plastic bag bans, for example. I hope we get to talk about Maine's later on. That's one policy example. We banned foam here too. That's another one. So bans. But then, you know, the movie touched on this thing called extended producer responsibility. And I just want to go over that a little bit because it's a little bit jargony, right? Extended producer responsibility. But when you see that term, what it really means is making those producers internalize the costs that they are right now externalizing onto society. So, you know, it's making them pay, polluters pay is basically what that means. When it comes to recycling, extended producer responsibility for packaging means that producers would pay a fee to sell products that are packaged into a jurisdiction. Those product fees are often based on the recyclability, so that's really important, right? Can this thing actually be recycled? If not, if it's going to end up in the landfill, then you pay more. There are other countries doing other types of fees that are more eco-friendly too. So like volume, you know, can you make a concentrated dish soap, for example, so to save? So there are a lot of ways to improve the environmental friendliness of packaging. And then that fee goes directly to municipalities who are basically managing that waste on behalf of those producers. And the thing about it all is that thousands of corporations all over the world, like Unilever, Pepsi, Procter & Gamble, already do this. They already pay for municipal recycling in countries all over the world. They do it in Canada, they do it in the EU, they do it in Australia, Brazil, China, Russia. It's really the way that the world is moving. So we have our first poll question. Let's try it.
All right, so we're just gonna launch this poll. If you haven't done it before, a little box will pop up onto your screen, and we ask that you try to answer it. Just, it's an easy question. And we'll be able to get a little bit of information about how familiar you are or were with recycling reform and extended producer responsibility. So I'll give you a little bit of time to respond, and we'll see. All right, I'll give it a few more seconds. Almost everybody's in. All right. So everybody should be able to see these results. Interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's pretty split even. That's really neat. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about extended producer responsibility. Our panelists are really knowledgeable about it, so we're going to leave a lot of space for them to talk about that. But first, a little background. So Maine had, right before COVID hit, a great public hearing on extended producer responsibility for Maine. It was a law that DEP submitted. It was called LD 2104, an act to support and increase the recycling of product packaging. And this was a response to a lot of the things you saw in the movie about China closing its doors, to a lot of our recycling. And now we need it more than ever because of COVID-19, but municipalities all over the state have been struggling to keep their recycling programs because it's a big cost. So, just a little background on where that law is and where it came from. So it was voted out of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee right before the pandemic. The public hearing was really packed. There was 2 overflow rooms. It lasted 8 hours. There was over 180 pieces of testimony submitted to the ENR committee. So there was a lot of support, and it was very popular with the people who had the chance to learn about it. There was a lot of support from the Environmental Priorities Coalition, the public, and even businesses. We had businesses testifying in support. But like I said, it all came to a halt because of COVID-19, and we just don't know exactly what's going to happen right now. There's still hope. And the thing about it is it gives us more time. This is a law that has to happen here in the state in order to make recycling sustainable. And so it gives us more time, and we're going to keep pursuing it. And then just a note about recycling reform. So this is a campaign that NRCM made to help people around the state understand what extended producer responsibility is, and to give a sort of a coordinated vehicle for municipalities and the public to promote this law and share this law and support it. We're going to talk a little bit more about those action steps, but I just wanted to say now that when you see this logo and you see our mascot here in our communications, that's Boxy, he's our mascot. That means we're talking about this extended producer responsibility law, this law that would make corporations pay for the waste they sell into our communities instead of taxpayers. So that's what it's important. That about wraps up this little mini review. Let's get to the heart of this whole event, which is our panel. Anya, do you want to kick it off?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Chrissy. Good little review. So first, I would like to welcome all of our panelists. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourselves since you know yourselves best. So let's start off with Nicole. Go for it.
Thank you so much, Anya, and thank you, Chrissy, for that great review of what seems like was so long ago, but was really only a few months ago at the State House. I am Nicole Brickowski. I'm the state representative for Ellsworth and Trenton. This is my first term serving in the Maine House, and my committee assignment is energy, utilities, and technology. So I spend a lot of time thinking about climate change and environmental issues in general. But my one of my true passions has been waste management for a very long time. I credit my parents for that. My mom was an early recycler and has been avidly seeking avenues for all materials to make it into a proper waste management stream, by hook or by crook practically, my whole life. I grew up cleaning trash off the side of the road with my parents. We're still doing it to this day. Things haven't changed. They've in fact gotten worse, as you've probably seen, driving out and about and walking on roadsides. So I'm participating today because I believe that plastic pollution is one of the biggest issues that we face as a planet. And I also was a co-sponsor of the plastic bag ban with two of my colleagues in the House, and a co-sponsor of the polystyrene ban, and a co-sponsor of the extended producer responsibility legislation. So went to Augusta and tried to get straight to work on some of these issues. One of the things that struck me thinking about my experience with waste management and this film was this quote that was said, which was, "We have to look at the root causes. We cannot be doing cleanups all of our lives. This is not a solution." And that really hit home for me because just in the past few weeks, my parents have picked up 100 bags of trash along Route 1A, which welcomes people to the Acadia region, to this place that I've called home for most of my life. And they've cleaned up that part of the road before. So it's an ongoing problem, and we can't keep trying to stop it at the end. We need to try to stop it at the beginning. So I'll just leave with that as something that really struck me and felt like it related to everyday experiences here.
Great, thanks, Nicole. And just before we move on, I see we're getting a couple questions in our Q&A, which is awesome. I just want to let you know that we will get to the questions a bit later on. So if we don't ask it right away, don't worry, we see you, and we're going to be asking that and addressing them later. So thanks so much for sending them. All right, let's move on to you, John.
Unmute myself. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Anya, and thanks, Chrissy, and everybody at Environment Maine and NRCM for having me. My name is John Haidt. I am a policy analyst with the Conservation Law Foundation. I am the non-Mainer here, forewarning. I live right outside of Boston, which I know is something I'm not always supposed to share, but I'm here to help out and provide a little bit of a regional perspective on some of these policies. There's a lot of amazing, excellent work happening in Maine, and on many issues of plastic, Maine is actually leading, not just the region, but the country. But there are lots of other people in lots of other states, and we need to make sure that they're on board as well. So I've primarily focused my work in Massachusetts, although I was part of the EPR discussions, the plastic bag and the polystyrene ban that have happened in Maine. I should add, Conservation Law Foundation, we're a regional environmental legal nonprofit. So we have offices in 5 of the 6 New England states, and one of our zero waste staff attorneys also works in Connecticut. So we have people working in every state in New England. I have worked on a lot of the different areas of waste management, including food waste and textiles and electronics, but most recently I've focused pretty heavily on plastics. I'll say, one of the most powerful moments for me in the film actually links to a lot of what's happening right now in the country. For many years, the environmental movement has focused primarily on conservation, on protecting space. And in terms of plastic, that means keeping plastic out of space, right? Like as Nicole was sharing, picking up plastic from roadsides, keeping it out of our environment. But some of the most powerful moments for me in the film was seeing, a family living their whole lives in the shadow of a 10-story pile of trash in India. or seeing a family cooking tofu that they're going to eat over a fire fueled by plastic in China, or watching little girls playing in a playground in full view of a plastic manufacturing plant in Texas. And we've been having a lot of conversations over the past couple of days about what does all that mean? What does that mean for us as environmentalists? What does that mean for us as people who care about these issues? And I think as we've focused less on the environment and protecting the environment and more on us and protecting other people, we've started to see that the same systems that put a police officer's knee on a black man's neck in Minneapolis is the same system that puts carcinogens and other toxins in little girls' bodies in playgrounds in Texas. So when we're talking about climate justice, when we're talking about pushing back against the plastics industry, we're also talking about racial justice. We're also talking about lifting up those who are oppressed in this country. And you can't unlink the two. They're inextricably linked. So that's been something that I took away from the movie and has just been hitting home harder and harder over the past week.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that perspective. And last but not least, we have Vanessa.
I don't know how I'm going to follow up with that. Vanessa Berry, and I'm an environmental educator for Ecoman. For folks who don't know what Ecoman is, we are a recycling facility as well as a waste to energy facility in Greater Portland area. We're located right on Outer Congress in Portland. And we service about a third of the state's population for recycling or waste services or both. So my job there is mainly education about diversion. So I work with, elementary school students to senior citizens to encourage people to practice those 3 R's that we love so much, primarily of the reduction. So source reduction and reducing the amount of waste that we send to landfill or even have to deal with in disposal. That's really our big focus. We want to see less waste, not more good waste. And I think in watching that film, I think it brings a lot home for me. Especially when they're looking through and digging through all of the plastics in, they're going overseas and they're finding American plastic. They're finding stuff from Oregon. They're finding stuff from Canada. And I think that really had a resounding impact on me, because when you throw something away, it doesn't go away. Someone has to manage it and deal with it. And if things are being mismanaged, they end up in inappropriate places, like somebody's backyard or their neighborhood. So I think focusing on that is really important. And I think also when we're talking about extended producer responsibility, I think the fact that we have been paying the price for the waste stream that really we're not responsible for as consumers, we're being pushed to consume things that come in packaging that we really don't have the capability to deal with. And then, and then we pay the cost of that disposal as well. So, flipping that system and kind of realizing who has the power and the decision-making there, and making sure that those people are ultimately responsible for the disposal and end of life as well. Because they have the ultimate deciding factor of whether they make their package in something that can be recovered, or if they make their products in things that come in no packaging at all. If we think about, old school, techniques for food packaging, and a lot of that stuff used to be biodegradable, or it came in no packaging. Like imagine going to the store and grabbing a loaf of bread that didn't come in a plastic bag. Thinking about ways that we can completely eliminate the need for packaging, that's unnecessary. And then for the stuff that is necessary for safety and health and whatever other reasons, that stuff has an end of life that's useful and can be managed sustainably and, with the environment in mind. So that's something that definitely has an impact on me. seeing, you know, trash audits even at schools to watch the accumulation of waste even in our classrooms or at home. That's another one that just, I read in a book not too long ago that the average person in their lifetime creates 102 tons of trash in one person's lifetime. So there are billions of people that live on this planet. That's a lot of waste, and where's it all gonna go? So thinking about that when we make decisions, and making sure that as, you know, individuals, that we advocate to put things to better and higher uses, and that those that have control should take responsibility for the stuff that they're putting out there to us.
Thanks, Vanessa. So there was something that you said there about imagining if something didn't come in a package. And there's a comment here about market demand and supply. And so I was wondering about if maybe some of you could talk about what, you know, where is all this coming from? Where is this pollution coming from? You know, thinking about what they said in some of the earlier parts of the film about the industry driving demand. Can you talk about that and maybe talk about what's happening in those countries as far as putting those disposables in the hands of of people who formerly lived in a culture where disposability wasn't a thing? Anyone can answer that one.
I can jump in. I think one of the most important things for me, the lessons that I've learned as I've dove deeper and deeper into plastic, is that wasteful behavior is a learned practice. It's got to come from somewhere. The education is coming from somewhere. And some of you who are a little bit older than me may or may not remember some Life magazine pictures, covers from the 50s and 60s, especially in the 50s. There was one in particular of a family standing and the camera's up above the family, and they're throwing armfuls of plastic up into the air, and it's flying all over the place. And the takeaway from that was, we've entered the disposable age. You know, women who are home with their children no longer need to do dishes. You can go, you know, for a picnic and leave your trash alone. You don't have to bring dishes. You don't have to wash them. You don't have to do anything. It's all disposable. And that was a lesson that was driven home by the plastics industry, who was looking to get a bunch of people hooked on their product, and it worked. So I find it very disingenuous when these same companies that 50 and 60 years ago got the American people, and now the rest of the world, addicted to plastic, tell us that it's our problem, that we are making this trash, that we are making this litter. So I think that's at the root of it, is understanding where the education is coming from.
And I would add, I think, Chrissy, you mentioned a little bit in the question about consumer choice and us driving supply and demand of items. But I have this experience all the time in the grocery store where I'm looking for something that I want. I don't want the packaging. What I want is inside the packaging. And my choices of packaging are bad across the board. So how can I use my dollars to promote good packaging when that was never an option for me? Now I'm pleased to see that there's local food that's in better packaging, that's reusable, that I'm finding at stores like Hannaford or Shaw's. And I'm starting to be able to make those choices, but that's only possible for me because maybe I can, you know, throw an extra $1 or $2 into that. And again, we have an equity issue that some people are having to accept worse packaging. Then they're in Ellsworth, for instance, paying $3 a bag for trash to get rid of that bad packaging when they didn't have a choice because it wasn't available to them for the product that they were interested in.
Thanks. I just want to step in for a minute because we're talking a lot about the plastic that we end up buying and bringing home. We do have a poll question that I would like to send out there. I'm just curious if people have any idea sort of what percentage of our waste that we recycle here in Maine. So I'm going to send that out there and give people a few seconds to answer that. And then maybe Vanessa can tell us. Few more seconds.
We're not allowed to vote to skew the results to the correct answer.
No cheating. All right, looks like just about everybody's in. Get a couple more in. Great. So Okay, so most people, 69% of people thought that we recycled 20%. So we're pessimistic here. But let's see, we've got 29% said 40% of our waste is recycled, and one or two people that said they thought 60%. Nobody thought 80%. So the answer is about 40%, and unfortunately dropping. So I'm sure Vanessa can talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, so just, do you want me to give a little bit of context about global recycling markets post 2018? Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
If you want to talk a bit about sort of what happened, we do have a question here about what sort of happened with China. Let's see, that was, well, I lost it, but
yeah,
Jim.
I've got the tea. I've got
Great.
you. So recycling has changed a lot since, I mean, it's really boomed since the 90s. And it started with source separated recycling, where people were sorting the stuff out at home. They had to have a bin for their newsprint and all of their cardboard, their metals, their different types of plastics, their different colored glass. Not as convenient as your traditional single sort or single stream or zero sort, whatever they're calling it. That process is a lot more efficient, and it's a lot easier for consumers to participate. But the secret truth is that people are recycling more than what is actually acceptable in recycling programs. And part of that is because things are mislabeled. There are packages that we can buy that have that little recycling symbol, the chasing arrows on there, that are not curbside recyclable. We can even buy items that say they're curbside recyclable, only to find out later that our local facilities do not accept them. And then there's also, there's items that can't be properly sorted in the facilities. So, things like plastic bags. So those kinds of things have very specific markets, have to be really clean in order to find the right destination and be recovered. And so when those get put in the bins, they become contamination. So contamination is a growing problem across the board, whether it's wish cycling, where people really hope that their facility will take it, and so they put it in the bin and it disappears. So that means it worked, right? And then there's, a little bit of negligence or, inappropriate items getting found in the recycling. I mean, we've pulled out things from samurai swords to dirty diapers and kitty litter and all that other crazy stuff. And with these facilities, it's designed to pull out recycling. It's not designed to pull out contamination. So we're struggling with that as recyclers, where we're trying to market this material, and it's coming into us with, it could be 30% contamination coming in. And for a while, that wasn't a huge problem downstream. We could find homes for all of our materials without any hitch. And some of that was the reliance on China for markets. I'm not speaking specifically to Ecomane's practice. This was something that was happening on a global level. But China had a huge manufacturing industry, and they had a huge appetite for this material, this feedstock. So they were taking stuff and allowing that 30% contamination, and it continued to get worse and become a growing issue until ultimately in 2018, the environmental minister basically, they put in a ban on the importation of recycling, unless it met very, very rigorous standards for contamination. Basically, if anything came into the country that they were cutting open at the docks and inspecting, if it was anything over 0.5% contaminated, they would send it back at the recycling facility's expense. So at this point, essentially, there's no markets in China anymore, where there used to be this huge demand. So that well has dried up. That avenue is just not an option anymore. And what happened is it completely disrupted the supply and demand cycle. Materials, they can be really high value for a little while, and then sometimes, like, let's say the price of oil goes down, so it's cheaper to get virgin plastic. So the recycled plastic doesn't sell very well. So the value of that goes down, and then it becomes cheaper than oil. So then it goes back up. It's all supply and demand chains. And a lot of it's tied to oil prices. Some of it is tied to consumer demand. So if people are demanding that their paper is made from post-consumer recycled content, then you'll see that demand go up and the value of that material goes up for us. But right now, as of 2018, we were in the lowest of the low, to the point where a lot of facilities, had discontinued certain parts of their collection. So they stopped taking things like mixed plastics, or they stopped taking things like mixed paper. So those were things that were primarily going to China, and are not anymore. And if you don't have those buyers domestically, it's really hard to find them when those markets are that tight. And now it's a buyer's market where, folks who are running plants in Kentucky, and they've got all of these recycling facilities, all of these municipal facilities like Ecoman, who are trying to sell them their stuff. They get to choose based on who's got the cleanest material, and it can come in at a lower price for them too. So it's really disrupted the system. A lot of that stuff that was once easy to recycle, easy to market, is no longer easy. And that's why we're seeing so many municipal recycling programs shut down, because the cost of processing that material is far exceeding the revenue that they were getting from selling the material in the commodities market. So if that makes sense, just to kind of explain, the context of what's going on with China, that avenue is not really an option for us anymore. We've got to really look at domestic solutions for our waste, which I think we should have been doing all along. I'm sure that many of you will agree that the United States should be able to deal with the United States waste.
To that point, Vanessa,
yeah.
we've got some questions coming in a little more about extended producer responsibility. So I think, people are eager to know how this could be a solution. Lisa Pullman says, can EPR turn us around as quickly as this problem has arisen? Jenny Shotwell's wondering how EPR can affect big companies, the big oil and gas companies. And then Lucas Kella is asking, where this is happening at the state level, federal level. So maybe we could sort of turn the conversation to those things and answer some of those questions.
Shout out to some familiar names on the list of questions. Good to have you all participating. I'm not sure I could answer how quickly it could turn around, but we know that businesses can and do make a lot of decisions based on their bottom line. And right now, it's easiest and best for their bottom line to externalize or shift that cost of the waste management to us as taxpayers. But we have the ability to change that paradigm and to put the cost back onto the producers who are making those choices. And at that point, their choices either continue to make a product that's very difficult to recycle and pay more, or pay a little bit more probably for a better and more easily recyclable, and not just that, but a product with less packaging, and save the money because of a tiered system that they'd be paying into to help manage the waste. So ultimately, it's their choice how they want to respond to the market signal that a policy like this would send. And I just think it's phenomenal how widespread this policy is around the world and the effect that it's had. I just pulled up a chart that NRCM had put together as part of our advocacy on this. And you find that Belgium, for instance, has been doing this policy for 30 years, and they pay only slightly more per person than we do to manage their waste with that product, or that cost internalized to the product, but their recovery rate is 80%. So I compare that to our 40% rate. There are other jurisdictions that are paying less than we're paying and getting a better recovery rate. So, I mean, I think it became clear to me as I dug into this topic that we have a proven market-based solution to shift the incentives for the producers to do what is better for for us as people and for our environment. And to Vanessa's point about China not accepting the waste, I think that's good. I think we need to come to terms with what we're producing and not shift it to places that have poor labor and environmental standards and pretend that the problem isn't there. So I think it was a blessing in disguise, although a painful transition point for us.
Yeah, I might just add one more thing about the, the kind of the, I like to use the bathtub metaphor. I don't know if, I'm sure some of you have heard it, but they talk about, the problem with plastic is kind of like it's an overflowing bathtub. And in order to solve the problem, you don't just go and grab a mop and start mopping up the floor, the mess on the floor. You go over to the tap and you try to turn down or turn off the tap. And this is what that could do. This is what that could be capable of doing. It could either transition away from the not readily recyclable kinds of packaging in favor of things that can be recovered pretty unanimously across the board. Or it could just completely eliminate the unnecessary packaging that's out there. So I think, it's that solution, like, the MRF or the local municipal recycling facilities, yes, they can maybe add more investments to their technology, but if the packaging changes in 6 months, what good is that going to do? If manufacturers can continue to change their product packaging without any regard to the end of life, or any responsibility for the disposal costs of that packaging, then what's to say they won't choose a cheaper option in 6 months and then give us another package out in the market that we can't manage. So it's, that bathtub solution, like that metaphor just really, like, I think it explains it very well. We've got a huge overflowing bathtub of plastic waste, and the only way we can really manage the problem and deal with what's out there is if we stop or turn it down so that we can, actually have the capacity to deal with the stuff that's out there.
If I can just jump in really quickly, Anya.
Yep.
So I can speak a bit to the states and at the federal level question. There's been a ton of discussion nationwide about EPR for packaging. I think it's really important to note right off the bat that EPR, extended producer responsibility, handing these costs back to producers, it's not a new policy. In the US, we actually have close to 140 different EPR laws in effect right now. None of them cover packaging. Maine was very close to being the first to cover packaging this past session, but this isn't a new policy for the US. We've got, we were working on a proposal in Massachusetts at the same time that we were working on one in Maine. Lawmakers in Vermont have been discussing EPR for packaging. Oregon, Washington, California, Illinois, even North Carolina has had legislators discussing EPR for packaging. At the federal level, we have a very exciting bill called the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. It was introduced in February of this past year by Congressman Blumenthal from Southern California and Senator Udall from New Mexico. And what I think is most exciting about this bill is that it really takes a holistic crack at pushing back on the plastics industry. All the power for EPR, it's a great policy, it's fantastic. It's not a silver bullet. And I think it's important to remind everybody that, we've got a plastic bag ban in Maine. We've got a polystyrene ban in Maine. Those are really important. And the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act actually has a bunch of these different policies built in. So not only does it have a plastic bag ban and a polystyrene ban and EPR for packaging, but it would set up a national bottle deposit return, a bottle bill. It would require these producers to hit certain levels of recycling by certain dates. So by 2030, I think it's something like 70% of all packaging would have to be recycled. It would also require producers to take recycled material and use it in their packaging again. Right now, a lot of our plastic gets turned not into new bottles or into new bags, it gets turned into Trex decking or it gets turned into a park bench. The Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act would require companies to use plastic in the same packaging. Once again, so it's only when we approach this problem from that larger perspective of using all of these different policy pieces that we're really going to get there. But I think a great first step is at least handing the cost back to producers and saying, this is your mess, you've got to clean it up.
Thanks, John. So we do have a question here from Elizabeth asking about, and I think it's really relevant right now with the pandemic, we can no longer take cloth bags to supermarkets. I know that as John mentioned, we had this plastic bag ban, but it got moved back. And so I'm wondering if Nicole, as a co-sponsor of that bag ban, if you can talk a little bit about what happened with that, where it's going, and what we can do to bring it back.
Sure. So our plastic bag ban was due to go into effect on Earth Day this year. The COVID-19 crisis started a little ahead of that. And in order to help businesses with what we anticipated and we're now seeing as a very difficult time period, and a time period in which their price cost sensitivity is higher than ever, we decided to slide the bag ban start date until January. Part of it is that businesses were preparing for a certain date to start, and if many of them had nowhere to use the rest of the bags they bought, and we didn't think it was fair to, even though they were anticipating using them by April, that they'd be stuck with those bags, which is just more needless waste. So that shift was done to support the businesses. It was not done on account of any clear scientific data that plastic bags were, better regarding COVID-19 than a reusable bag or of any variety. To answer that question, it's been a little bit challenging for me to see some of those decisions that stores have made, but we can always be creative. This was something that a constituent of mine did, and she did it. She's fully dedicated, and it was a rainy, cold day, and she put all of her groceries right back in her cart, wheeled them out to her car, and packed them in her bags in her car. So even when these hurdles come to us, there's often a creative way around it. And I would encourage you all to do that. I've been doing it now. Some stores are letting you bring your own bags in and just packing them yourself. But I mean, I've been glad to see that I have yet to see any scientific evidence that a reusable bag, has exacerbated the COVID-19 situation at this point.
Thanks. And it just got me thinking too about just sort of the zero waste movement. Maybe we could talk a little bit about, what zero waste is looking like in this moment with COVID, and what you think maybe the future is, maybe in spite of COVID.
Well, I can say this, people aren't losing their focus on zero waste. I think there's been a lot of media attention, especially on some of the rollbacks, right when COVID first started to come on our radar here in the US, there were a number of op-eds, most of which have actually been linked back to think tanks that have associations with the plastic industry, linking COVID-19 and plastic bags. And so I think that the plastics industry is actually looking at this moment as a moment to really gain lost ground. And I say that because I feel really optimistic. I actually feel really hopeful. The plastics industry is an industry that, for all their power and all their wealth, is not very financially stable. They have to constantly keep making more plastic and getting more plastic into our homes in order to make money. The minute that industry stops expanding, stops growing, the whole thing starts to fall apart. And so plastic bag bans, polystyrene bans, people leaving their, bringing their own reusable cups to stores, all of those things really have started to scare the plastics industry. And that's why they're fighting. I think right now they're fighting not just to put more plastic out into the world, but they're fighting to survive. And I think once the pandemic calms down and we're able to get some of these good policies back in place, I don't see any reason why we're not going to go even further and even faster.
And I want to add to that, one of the other notes that I took during the film was the statement that, we are all in this together, and that toxins don't understand political boundaries. And that is a perfect mirror image to a virus, a pandemic, global pandemic, that there's so much that we can't contain just to ourselves, that is interrelated. And so I think that growing awareness among people because of the virus can extend into greater awareness of our environmental impacts on each other.
All right. Well, that's all been really, really great. I think it's unfortunately, we're sort of getting close to the end. Anya and I are wishing that we had way more time over here, but we want to respect everyone's time. We know it's the afternoon and it's a beautiful day, so I hope people go out. I just have, we have a couple more slides that are important and we want to spend some time with. So let me just share my screen real quick. And a lot of pop-ups. Let me see if I can get this. Okay. All right. So, this is important too, how we take action. A lot of you had some really great questions, and there are resources that we'll talk about in just a second. So here are some of the 4 big actions that we see are good ones to take at this time, even despite of everything and despite COVID. So Anya, why don't you talk about the first 2 there?
Yeah, well, John actually already mentioned the Break Free from Plastic Act, which is great. That's perfect. Means I don't have to say much of it again. But essentially, just to reiterate, the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act builds upon statewide laws across the country, from bottle bills to bans on the worst single-use plastics. And so if the act becomes law, it would continue to reduce single-use plastic and packaging nationally, and also finance recycling, composting, and reusable infrastructure. It would also save our local and municipal governments billions of dollars per year by shifting that cost of managing waste and recyclables from local and municipal governments to the producers, like we've been talking about. So one thing you can do is you can sign Environment Maine's petition asking Congress to move this act forward and move us beyond plastic. And on that note, I'll pass it over to Chrissy, but if you're wondering where you can sign this petition, keep an eye on your inbox tomorrow. We will be sending a follow-up email with all of these resources for you to take action and to share with others. So go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, and so then, there's, you all had a lot of great questions about EPR for packaging, and a lot of them could be answered by going to our website, recyclingreform.org, and we're going to send you an email tomorrow with a link to that website in it. I apologize that we couldn't make this event longer to answer all of your EPR questions, but please know that I'm available to answer them anytime, and I'm sure Anya and all the panelists could help you too. So just rest assured that. So with recycling reform, it was going through the legislature this year, and that was good. It raised a lot of awareness. So a lot of people in Maine know about this now, and so we need to keep going. We need to keep pushing on it. So NRCM has what's known as our municipal resolution, and it's basically an official letter that municipalities and town councils can adopt. This is, we officially support recycling reform. We have 20 towns who've adopted it already. They represent over 200,000 Mainers. So the awareness is really growing, and we want you to help keep that awareness growing. And, it's people like you who have gotten that work done. So, please get in touch with us if you want to do that. And I'm happy to come with you to that town meeting and help you explain the benefits of it. So the municipal resolution is important. We also have a petition that you can sign, and that's a quick and easy thing that we encourage you to do and share with your friends and family. And again, the links to that will be available to you in tomorrow's email, or you can go directly to www.recyclingreform.org right now.
I do just want to, because I think it's an important question to address. Sorry, I'm just going to jump in. We did get a question from Lucas asking if the panelists see this as a bipartisan issue. And I'm wondering if someone can real quick just answer that real quick.
I can jump in. I'll stick to the local level. I'll leave the federal level to do whatever it wants to do for the moment. At the local level, yes, this is absolutely a bipartisan issue. I feel. I think anyone who is in a legislature and is of a fiscally conservative mindset we've had a lot of really good conversations with folks who are interested in keeping a tight hand on municipal budgets. Well, if municipal budgets are tight, lifting those costs off of taxpayers and putting them back onto the folks that are making this stuff in the first place, that fits. That makes sense. And so I think, something like EPR can speak not just to concern about the environment, but also can speak to care about, municipal budgets. And that's important.
Yeah, I would like to add, when I've been talking with people around the state, I think everyone sees that it's an unfair burden to taxpayers. And this really is about saving that money, because at the end of the day, taxpayers don't have any say in those products that are coming to their doorsteps and how to manage them. Like Vanessa made some great points, like there's certain kinds of equipment that municipalities have invested in. So if Amazon changes their packaging all of a sudden with no warning, like how is that investment that Ecoman made supposed to accommodate that without warning? So it really does, I think people understand that. And in my experience, people are sort of ready to sort of think about that and the benefits that it could bring to them. I think one of the big sort of assumptions that people make is that this cost is going to be passed on to the consumer. We didn't really get to talk about that, but in the research that we've done and the people that we've talked to, it really isn't. And that's because consumer prices are set in a very complicated way. And the fees that are passed on to manufacturers are so tiny, they're fractions of a penny, that there's really no way to pass it on. Or if they do pass it on, they pass it on to luxury items, because those people are already expecting to pay more for that luxury item. So it doesn't get passed on to day-to-day products. And actually you can see this in Canada. The people who informed me of this are in Canada, and they are experiencing this reality every day, because they have extended producer responsibility in some jurisdictions, but not others. So in Canada, the price is definitely not being passed on. So the price is very complex, and it's not as simple as that.
Thanks, everyone. Before we get to this last little slide, I just want to reiterate, because we still have some questions coming in, and some people are asking about where to get more information, things like there are a lot of questions about what can be recycled and how to know, and also things about what a list. Janet asked if there's a list of municipalities that have adopted the resolution. So included in that email tomorrow, we will connect you with all of the resources that you'll need to answer those questions. Also, feel free to email us, of course, but we'll be supplying a lot of those resources for you. I know Ecoman has some great stuff on how to know what to recycle. All right, Chrissy, you want to tell them about the last thing?
Thanks, Anya. I'm glad you pointed those questions out. Yeah, I mean, so we're ready to move on to the raffle. So we made a raffle for you guys because we wanted you to come, but also because these resources are really great and we wanted you to know about them. Oh, sorry, slide advance. We have, Anya, do you want me to read all four, or do you want to?
Go for it.
Okay, so I'm just going to read quickly to you what these things are, because they're good resources, again, that can help your learning. So first up, we have Plastic, A Toxic Love Story by Susan Frinkle. The description of that is: plastic built the modern world, but a century into our love affair with plastic, we're starting to realize it's not such a healthy relationship. Journalist Susan Frinkle creatively tells the story of plastic through 8 familiar plastic objects: a comb, chair, frisbee, IV bag, disposable lighter, grocery bag, soda bottle, and credit card. Her conclusion: we cannot stay on our plastic paved path, and we don't have to. So someone's going to win that book. That's the yellow book there on the far left. We have another book, Plastic Ocean by Captain Charles Moore with Cassandra Phillips. And you actually saw him in the movie. It was the Alguita ship that you saw. So you'll get to, the winner of this book will get to read more about his story. So in that book, he tells us about encountering the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in 1997. The results of the first study in 1999 were shocking. Plastic debris trawled in his nets outweighed zooplankton, the ocean's food base, by a factor of 6 to 1. The book takes the reader through his initial voyage to the gyre and his fierce game-changing work to engage the world in recognizing and taking action on the plastic ocean crisis. And then we also have a garden kit from Environment Maine. Anya, why don't you actually talk about that one?
Sure. So as many of you may know, one of our things that we've worked a lot on is our Save the Bees campaign. And actually, Representative Brickowski was a bill sponsor to ban some of the most toxic chemicals and pesticides to bees. So we are giving away a bee-friendly garden kit, which includes a packet of wildflower seeds that are very bee-friendly for you to sprinkle out into your yard. And then also some tips on how to have a bee-friendly yard and garden, and then a cute sign that you can put in your yard to tell everyone that it is bee-friendly.
Thanks. And then lastly, we have a complimentary one-year NRCM membership. Thanks to our members, NRCM aggressively defends Maine's environment for ourselves, our families, and our future generations. Members receive a quarterly newsletter and legislative report card for the inside scoop on environmental advocacy in Maine, invitations to special events like our popular Puffin Cruise and Citizens Action Day, discounts to Maine sporting camps, and access to a responsive staff who's ready to help you reach your local sustainability goals. And that is our raffle prizes. Keep your eyes out for tomorrow's email. That'll have those important action steps that you can take, those links to those resources, and it'll have the big winners.
Yes, and also keep in mind that, as we said earlier, this program was recorded, and so we will be posting that as well, so you can view it, share it with others. If you have any questions, please feel free to email myself or Chrissy. We'll also include contact information for our panelists in that email tomorrow. They welcome questions, would love to help educate and spread the word on all of these important initiatives. So thanks so much for joining us tonight. Thank you to all of our panelists and for bringing your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we hope you have a good and safe rest of the evening.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.